So how many here have heard about crowdfunding? Okay, how many have heard of Kickstarter, IndieGoGo? How many have heard of the Oregon Intrastate offering? One. Okay. Reg CF crowdfunding? Okay, so the reason I ask these questions is there's a lot of ways you can actually crowdfund. A lot of the popular ones that we think of are like Kickstarter, which I've used for some of these products I'll talk about and Christoper's used. But GoFundMe is a platform. There's a lot of different ways you can crowdfund. And I was thinking about that as I was driving here. You know, crowdfunding isn't really something new. Like, humans have been doing this for a long time, whether it's like people get together and raise a barn, you know, an all-in-one community, or even if you think about like places of worship like churches, you know, people are basically, in a sense, crowdfunding to support the pastor and the building and all that stuff, right? Humans have been sort of crowdsourcing work and making things happen with synergy for a while, but in the last, 10 years, or not even 10 years, there's been a lot of online platforms and regulations that have lifted that have made crowdfunding more of a viable source for running a business and for either raising equity or capital for pre-orders, or maybe some of you may have heard of like blockchain. So like Bitcoin, for example, there's initial coin offerings, and now there's initial licensing offerings, and there's like all sorts of things that you can do as far as just sort of crowdfunding money or equity in some form for your business. So I've been doing crowdfunding. I was trying to think, like, what was my first crowdfunding campaign technically? And it was probably actually when I was in college. I did a lot of volunteer work with international students, and I would essentially crowdfund campaigns where I'd like go around and like connect a Square account to my personal bank account, charge everyone's credit cards, and raise money to like go on a trip to Montana, to Glacier National Park. And we'd like pack like 20 students in 2 vans and like drive up there. I'd manage all the money to get the food and organize everything and come back, right? That's an example of crowdfunding. I've done like GoFundMe accounts where I've raised money to get like a bus license or help my brother go to dance school or things like that. But where I've had what you guys are most interested in, probably a lot of success and failure, has been using Kickstarter with respect to my game company, Massif Games. So Massif Games is a board game publishing company. We make 3-dimensional products. I have a couple of them here that I'll show you. And it started with the idea when I was hiking in the French Alps. I was like, oh, I wonder if I can create this like 3-dimensional mountain climbing game that's sort of unique that might inspire people to play it and get out in nature and stuff like that. So I started playing around with it, and at the same time I started looking, and I realized that a lot of other game companies were starting to use Kickstarter as a way to raise money for developing games. And in fact, Kickstarter was becoming one of the major platforms, so much for that even established publishers were that already had money and resources were taking their products and putting them on Kickstarter as well. Just because I think I forget the stats for like last year, but it's like over $100 million was raised on Kickstarter just for board games. It became Kickstarter's like #1 category, which is a little bit ridiculous. And now it's a crowded market, and so now I have to figure out how I can really differentiate or like merge with another company to really increase our presence because it's so crowded. That's another story. But I guess the point is, like, people were like, hey, crowdfunding is a great way to raise money for your business to get a product off the ground. So my first project was, I'm just going to tell you guys stories, and then I'll give you some tips, and you can ask me questions if you're considering your own campaign or whatever, because I feel like people learn by stories the best. So does that sound good to you guys? Cool. So my first project, like, I had this mountain idea, but then I was also like, oh, I have this idea to make like these game stands that will like help other small publishers when they go to conventions sort of show off their board games. So it's like this stand you can put together. There's different sizes. You can show your books or your games, right? So this was my first thing, and I was like, oh, I wonder if I can crowdfund this. Well, this is actually a business-to-business product. It's not a direct-to-consumer product, and so I barely funded it. In fact, I sort of cheated a little bit in that I took out a loan and had someone else help me complete the funding to get don't tell Kickstarter this because they'll get mad and won't let me use their platform again. But I mean, I delivered my product and made everything, so it worked out. But like, it was a hard sell because it was a business-to-business product in a new category that people weren't familiar with, and there wasn't a big crowd. So one of the things that I like to say, and many other Kickstarter creators will tell you, and crowdfunding people in general will tell you, you have to bring your crowd with you to the campaign. You can't just launch something and then like go around, hey, back my campaign, and hope everything does it. No, you have to like bring it as soon as possible. And it varies on the type of campaign you're doing too, but like, for example, with Kickstarter, it's gotten to where a lot of Kickstarter campaigns, if you haven't raised 33% of your goal by like day 3, you're probably going to fail, or you're not going to raise all the money you need to raise, because it's become so much of less of a raising money to fund a new idea and more just like a e-commerce jerk reaction buy that people use to really just like, oh, that's cool, and I'll fund it. So it's sort of shifted in its model. And it's even interesting because Kickstarter themselves, they're a B Corp, a benefit corporation that says, hey, we want to help art and cool projects and minority entrepreneurs and all this stuff, create new things for the world. But at the same time, they're allowing these billion, or not billion, I don't think I've seen any billion, but $1 million companies come in and use the platform to raise money for the product, which means that like all the people that are coming to Kickstarter are like spending money there, and the little guys that are trying to actually make something and get their name out there and create something cool and unique often get overshadowed, or the backers don't have enough money. So it's an interesting, I could get into the pros and cons of that. But so that was my first crowdfunding campaign. So my lesson learned from this is, if possible, don't crowdfund a business-to-business product, especially in a very, very niche market. It's just really tough. It worked out, but like, it's not that easy. Okay, my second product was this game. This is the one I talked about that I had the inspiration for in the French Alps. So I spent about 2.5 years going around, and there are various iterations of this. The first version looked like crap. It was like these little things you stacked on top of each other and they would fall down the minute you like touched it. But I went around to Indiana to big game cons. I went to Germany to the biggest game thing in the world. I went all around Corvallis and Dallas. I grew up in Dallas, believe it or not. All around the area to like show people the game and get their feedback and interesting. I was building a crowd, right? And so I did that for 2.5 years, which is actually a painfully long amount of time to like be not making any money and investing your own time and energy into a project that may or may not fail. And so I did that in November 2017. I just done my third big spiel lesson. It's called Game Event in Germany, where there's like 100,000 people that come and look at games and everything. Right. So right after that, I launched this game. I was $5,000 in debt in equity. I had $10,000 in debt on my credit card, and it was like, okay, this is make it or break it. Like either like I get this game to fund, or like I get a job and I try to pay off this credit card debt at horrible interest and never be an entrepreneur again. So I launched it, but fortunately, it actually took off. Within the first couple days, I'd raised around like 10, 15,000. By like day, I can't remember, I think day 9, I had reached my funding goal of around, what was it, like $60,000. And by the end of the month, I did about a 30-day campaign. I had raised $165,000 for this game. And then I raised additional money on something that you might want to take note of this, which is called a pledge manager. I raised another $20,000 in add-ons and additional units afterwards. So I raised roughly $180,000 in pre-orders for this, basically using Kickstarter and another pledge manager. I use CrowdOx, although I don't necessarily recommend it. And so that was a major success, okay? So then right after that was done, okay, started working on manufacturing it, and this is where the real pain of Kickstarter comes in. Not only do they take 5% of whatever you raise, and that includes whatever you charge for shipping. So if like I'm charging like this version here is like $60, and I charge like $20 shipping for Europe and 10 for USA, right? Well, not only does Kickstarter take 5% plus 3% roughly processing fees on the product, they also take that on the shipping, which makes it a pain in the ass to actually calculate how much you need to raise, because it's actually an impossible number, because every time you add something in, it changes it a little bit. So the most you can do is create 2 separate calculations in Excel and sort of like balance them out and try to get as close to a number of what you think you need to raise in order to actually fund your product. So anyways, Kickstarter does that, but the biggest thing about Kickstarter is like you have a requirement to your backers. If I go out and raise $150,000 in seed funding from a venture capital firm, right? I'm basically responsible to a couple people that I got money from, and I need to make metrics and show them the progress done. With a game like this, I had 1,800 backers. I think we're close to like 2,000 now. 1,800 people that are all expecting you to fulfill a product and do something well with your money, that want to be updated every week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that anytime you make the slightest change want to voice their opinion. That's a lot of stress and work. It's not just like you get a bunch of money and then you make it, at least not if you're doing it well and you want to keep those backers for follow-on products and build your brand and build your company. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes, not only like creating a campaign, which takes money to make a good video and make a good page and get the word out and go to the conventions or wherever it is that your backers are going to be, but then there's all this follow-up work where, you know, you want to be like fixing an error on the thing and working with the manufacturer. Instead, you're like typing up an update to all your backers because like, we haven't heard from you in a while, what's going on? Which is a cool thing in a sense because you're creating this community, but it's also a lot of work and stress. So anyways, launched this. I found out my wife is pregnant. I was like, okay, I need to make another product. I need to grow this business fast. I gave this to who I thought was going to be a decent co-founder. Hadn't signed paperwork yet, but that's another story. Tried to launch this game. Okay, this game, I found another guy. It's like this game where you stick these bits in potatoes and you drive them around the table. It's like a war game, but with real potatoes. It's pretty hilarious. Crazy Irish guy, no joke, over living on an island near Massachusetts, came up with the idea, posted it on Imager. It got 100,000 views overnight, just like went viral. I saw it, I was like, that's gonna make me some money. So I like contacted him and like, hey, like I just did this other one, let's do a crowdfunding campaign, can I license the game from you? And like, hey, let's make this a big thing, right? So I like basically took 3 months as opposed to 2.5 years to basically get this to where this is a prototype version, so that's why it's not quite as sexy. Get this to where I can launch a Kickstarter campaign for it, right? Got the pricing down to like $40 a game, et cetera, et cetera. Put it on Kickstarter, went to a bunch of conventions, told everyone about it. He was making these hilarious videos. He has this like YouTube channel, no joke, where he makes these swords and just like smashes stuff with these swords. So he had like 1 million followers on his YouTube channel. We were getting thousands of shares. I was like, this is money in the bank. I'm gonna launch this on Kickstarter and it's just gonna go wild and like forget about mountaineers, like sticking plastic in potatoes is what's the new thing, right? So launch it. 2 weeks in, I barely raised $14,000 out of my like, what was it, like 30,000 or something dollar goal. And that goal wasn't even enough to actually make money on. I was going to still have to invest some money on my own to make that, right? I ended up losing to date. We'll see if I can bring it back to life or not. I lost about $10,000 and 3 months of time doing this. So my question to you guys is, what did I do right with this one and wrong with this one? And I already gave you a hint before.
Marketing ahead of time.
Bringing my crowd with me. Yeah. So this one, I went and talked to people. I figured out how much they would be willing to pay for it. I figured out what they wanted, what are the features they liked. I got the word out. This one, I spent 3 months and I hardly did that at all. Last year, after that failure, I took it to Germany and I had a bunch of people play test it and everything. And it was like, hey, what do you think? What do you think? And like found out that people are only willing to pay like 25 bucks, maybe 20 bucks for this game. They loved the concept. It was hilarious. But so I like priced myself out because I didn't do my research. I didn't create a crowd around the product. So number one lesson of Kickstarter or crowdfunding in general is have a crowd with you. I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to say one other thing about organic interest rate offerings, and I'll let you go, and then maybe we can like talk about pros and cons, actual pros and cons of Kickstarter, because I don't think we've gotten into those yet. So, organic interest rate, so there's lots of different things. I'm an expert in Kickstarter, so that's called reward-based crowdfunding. But as I mentioned, there's other things like equity, loan-based, a lot of other ways to raise money. So in Oregon, there's this cool thing, and it's not very well utilized, partly because there's not really a good platform to do it on. But basically, a couple years ago, we enacted legislation that lets you raise money for a business from other Oregonians. So typically, let's say I want to go to you, and I ask you to give me like $2,000 or $20,000, whatever the number is, to invest into my business. Unless you're an accredited investor, which means you make roughly over $300K a year, or you have $1 million in assets, not including your house. I'm shouting out the numbers. I think those are roughly it. You're actually technically not able to invest in my business. So, and that's like, okay, well, how does that work? Like, you have a friend, they're starting a business, you want to like give them a couple thousand, but like you're technically not even allowed to because you need to be a accredited investor. Well, Oregon legislation, and again, I'm not an expert on this, basically passed it to where you can crowdfund up to, I want to say $250,000 with amounts ranging from $200 to, I want to say $2,500, somewhere in that range. And you can, so let's say like we want a good German restaurant in Independence. I'm guessing there's no German restaurant here, right? At least there wasn't when I was growing up. So let's say we wanted a German restaurant, and everyone in the community wants a German restaurant. We know it's going to take about $100,000 to create this awesome new restaurant that everyone in the community wants, right? That we've been hearing the rumors about. So we can set up with minimal paperwork, working with the SBDC, we can set up a prospectus and basically go out, and as long as we check their driver's license or whatever, raise up to $2,500 from each person in the community and fund that. Either you can do as equity, and you can set your terms of when you'll pay them back. It's pretty flexible, or as a loan, and you'll pay them back with interest. So you're not even giving up equity in your company. So that's a really cool thing that a few places have done. There's been like people out in Joseph, Oregon, and I think Brad Addig, who runs a co-working space in Corvallis, is trying to help a gal do it with like a donut food cart. And I know there's been some other ones that have done it. Hatch up in Portland used to help facilitate it. I think they had a platform, but I don't think they do anymore. Anyways, if you are interested, feel free after this to like get my card, and I'll help connect you to people who are able to do that. But that's a cool option, especially I think for local sector businesses where you like have a community that wants to be involved and invested in the business with you. A bank's not going to lend you money because they require cash flow and assets. Hey, go raise it from the community. So with that, I'm going to shut up and let Christoper talk.
Hi guys. Obviously there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm sure you're all here for different reasons, and I don't know what those reasons are, so I think the approach I'll take is just quickly tell you what I did and what worked and what didn't work, and then really kind of get into allow you to ask more questions, because that'll help focus why you're here. Maybe you can address those. So I had a dream of opening a coffee shop, a little bar thing, and I was 15, 16, I liked coffee shops, and then I was 21, 22, I liked bars, and I wanted to figure out how to blend the two. And I went to college, and I studied business, and then I still had this passion. I wanted my own little community spot. And you go write your business plan, you learn how to raise money, and then they tell you don't have enough money. So I turned to crowdfunding, and I looked at the several options that were out there, and Kickstarter attracted me for various reasons that we can get into later. So I decided to go for it. I read the rules, I studied a bit, I figured out which ones, which campaigns I liked, which campaigns I didn't like, and I launched my campaign. Salem, I grew up there, I'm from there, I have a large base there. So I raised like $26,000, which was enough to get me over that hump where the banks were like, okay, you have enough of your own money. And it just barely made it work. And since then we've opened and we've done very well, and super happy with it. This was 4 years ago. July will be our 4th year in business, and we started with 5 employees, and I'm up to about 46, 47 now. Growing every day, and so it's definitely a beast that the community has created, and that was because mainly of crowdfunding. So I have the community to thank, and that platform to look at and be very grateful for. That's what helped facilitate my growth. So I learned a lot through that campaign and watching and seeing how it works. And like I said, I don't know what you guys want to hear about, so I'm going to keep it kind of short and just open it up for questions or,
What was your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge is, I think with most people, ideas are easy. There's 1,000 ideas. There's 1,000 dreams. But crossing that line from what's in your head to what's reality, making that jump, making that leap, saying, I believe in myself, and saying, okay, I'm going to stop talking about it, and I'm going to do it. And I think Kickstarter specifically is one reason why I was attracted to this platform. It helped push me. I had a promise to the community that I had to fulfill. So that I was like, okay, after I made my video and it was all the way I wanted it, I knew if I pushed go that this was going to happen. Why? Because I had to work the video, I had to work the campaign. If the campaign worked, I got the money. If I got the money, I'm going to have to open. So that was my moment of jumping. And that pushed me. It had, if you tell someone you're going to do it, you're more likely to do it. You want to quit smoking, you want to start exercising, you keep it to yourself, it's harder to fulfill, right? But that's what the crowdfunding did. I told 1,000 people what I was going to do with their money. And I was not going to let them down, because that's my name, that's my reputation. So that helped bridge that gap from thought to reality for me.
Was your income that you got from Kickstarter, was that taxed as income or as equity?
Income, I believe. Yeah, it was 4 or 5 years ago. Is that right? Income? It was
Sort of, yeah, there's a trick, yeah.
And so, yeah, timing is this is one of the things I learned, timing, because, tax season comes around and they take their 30%. So of my 26, I only had 20 or 18 to work with. And I was like, oh, shoot, I should have planned this at a different time in the season to give myself more time to get it up and running, to get the doors open. So yeah, they will take a chunk, yeah.
Yeah, so if it's over a certain amount, I want to say like, was it 20,000 or 19,000 or something like that, they will issue a 1099-K to the IRS. And so like he said, timing is really important. And you also need to think about whether or not you want to use cash basis or accrual basis. So my first Kickstarter campaign, I did cash basis. So yeah, that's like taxable revenue. For this campaign, because I raised enough money, but I was like, there's no way in hell I can afford to like spend 40,000 on taxes this first year and then like completely in manufacturing and ship out 2,000 games in 50 different countries. I like was quickly scrambling because I launched this in November, right? I was like, okay, I got to switch to accrual-based accounting. And this is where it gets tricky because the IRS, at least to my knowledge as of last tax season, hasn't really issued any guidance on how to recognize income, specifically when you're not just raising it for your personal, but as through your business as pre-orders. And so like, depending which CPA you talk to, they'll be sort of iffy and they'll be like, I don't know. But what I did is I talked to a lot of the other game publishers that had done a similar thing, and what a lot of them said they did is they're like, yeah, we switch to accrual basis accounting, so we recognize income when we ship out product, and we book the income we get as a liability until then on our books. So you still owe people $180,000, it's booked as a liability. And then you pay tax when you recognize the revenue when you ship it out. But again, what I did, and so far it's worked out, we'll see if I get like a letter from the IRS, is like, I wrote a letter literally saying like, hey, I know Kickstarter likes to, let's just say they don't want to have anything to do with you guys and just call this personal income. But the reality is like that campaign was through my business account and these are pre-orders for a product. Therefore, I know you got this letter, this 1099-K, but I want to let you know that I'm using accrual basis accounting. I just switched. I issued this form like 667 or whatever. That's what's going on. And so far it's worked out for me and it's worked out for other game publishers. That's not to say they don't come back and be like, no, that's cash in the pocket 1099, like, so that's something to definitely think about as far as like what kind of accounting system you're using and when you launch your campaign.
I had an experience with the banks. Some banks didn't consider that my money. So I still got turned down even with that money because they said it wasn't yours, it was a gift, or because the crowdfunding, 4 years ago was, that wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And so I don't know if they've worked out the kinks since then, and banks look at it differently. So there's another challenge is, fortunate for me, the bank I went with said that was yours and that was your investment, so.
Yeah, I even heard stories on PayPal where like, if you're taking additional pre-orders, that's still sort of crowdfunding after the campaign and you get a bunch of money in your PayPal, the PayPal will freeze that money because they hear of it as a pre-order. So you also have to, so I always like, when I was taking additional pre-orders, I would just like every week transfer the money into my personal checking account from PayPal because they get really finicky about pre-orders and crowdfunding, so. Yeah.
Sure. Right. So there's a difference between his product, which is potentially global. Mine is not global. It's very isolated in Salem. And my answer to his question was what he did wrong here and what he did right here was his heart was here. He was trying to make money here. Attention in details. This was try to hit a home run. He saw an opportunity, and my personal thought or feeling is people know if you're trying to just get a quick buck or if this is something you believe in. And a lot of the campaigns that were successful are the ones that I felt like you believed in the person. And I tried some. I put money down to see the experience, to see how I felt, to see the process and how it went. So I learned to like unpack my own product. And so that would be my answer there. And by loving something and really like, it's your baby, people, that translates whether they're your people or you're not, whether that's your crowd or not. And I think it's different from product to product, or I am providing more of a service than a product. This is simply a product. So you kind of have to distinguish what is it you're providing, and that'll help determine how you're going to deliver that message. So, but in my local scenario, yes, my crowd was with me because I am from Salem, so that did help. And a lot of my family and friends and extended family, that was my crowd. So that was kind of a built-in in my scenario.
Raise yourself. You know
There's been some like 3D printer campaigns that I imagine are primarily B2B, a lot of them. I mean, this was technically B2B.
I can't think of any offhand. But
In the gaming sphere, I've seen a few, yeah.
there's no shortcuts. I mean, I think Kickstarter can be a tool, but there is no shortcuts to just get rich. And if the model applies in farming or manufacturing or whatever it is, you got to put work in. You got to know your product, you got to know your customers, and you got to be willing to spend the time and energy on that attention to detail. Otherwise, you're going to get lost in all the noise. And I think your Kickstarter campaign is going to be the same thing. It's not just to throw it out there and sit back and get my check. It's, like I said, when I hit that go button that next morning, I'm sending out emails and texts and phone calls and you know, I'm sending out the link and everyone and share it, and I'm asking, hey, will you please share this? Will you please tell your friends? You know, all these calls to act, you got to work it. It's a job, you know, it's dog eat dog on every single level. So there's no shortcut.
Yeah, I probably spent like 10 hours, 12 hours a day managing this campaign. And that wasn't including all the time getting ready for it beforehand. So I definitely agree with that. There's no shortcut.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I spent 8 or 10 hours a day making the video and analyzing each transition and the timing of it, because this is what it was going to be, how it was going to be presented. So I worked it before I launched it, and I launched it and I worked it, and it worked, and now I start my work. It's just work. You know, so I think that's the key takeaway for me, is you just have to work it, you know, from the get-go.
Yeah, so this campaign didn't get funded fully. So IndieGoGo will let you raise any amount of money and just keep that, whatever you raise, which I think is dangerous and doesn't give as much trust to your backers, because again, this is all about trust. Like, before you even launch a campaign, have you backed other people's campaigns? Have you been part of the culture? Are you creating a community to bring with you? But as far as like strategy for like, if you aren't going to make it, I think it's just like exit as gracefully as you can and be really upfront and honest with the backers. With this one, I mean, like, and failure is a good thing, and you got to be okay with failure. You're not going to get penalized. It's like, if you don't raise the amount of money, like, besides what you invested into making the video and the campaign and the graphics and all of that, like, you're not going to lose money from Kickstarter. However, what you want to do before you end it is really like get together with some advisors and strategize and be like, okay, is this something that we can take back and relaunch, or is this something that we really just need to give up on? Because if it's the first thing and you want to go back and do it, then you want to take advantage of the community you've brought with you to Kickstarter to date and get their feedback. Hey, why do you think this isn't going as hot as it could be? What would you do differently? And a lot of people have actually done this and got feedback from an unsuccessful campaign, taken that, modified it, gone back and relaunched and had an extremely successful one. So you just want to do it gracefully. And the most important thing I would say is just being really upfront and honest with your backers. Like, I'm brutally honest with my backers. I'm like, hey, we're delayed 3 months. It's mostly my fault. It's also partly the fault of this person. I'm really sorry. I'm trying to make it right with you. Just want to let you guys know. Versus like not telling them till last minute, and backers will appreciate that. There'll be some people that'll be like, why are you late again, or whatever. But in general, if you're honest and authentic, they respond to that and listen.
I'm sure that's one of the better mousetrap. You should buy mine.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely. That's one of the
downsides.
Yes, one of the downsides. If you're not protecting your idea and you simply put it on the platform, what are you doing? You're telling the world your idea. If someone's better funded, they're quicker, they're ready to go, pull the trigger, or they're already, you know, they're just hunting for a good idea. Yeah, you risk losing out on that advantage. Definitely. That
said, though, it is pretty rare. And like I work with a lot of entrepreneurs up in the Linn Benton counties, and a lot of entrepreneurs, especially new ones that come to me, they're like, oh, my idea, like, should I tell anyone about it? Like, keep it close. Like, will you sign an NDA? And I'm like, no, I'm not going to sign an NDA. There's a quote, like, there's no such thing as a good idea, and there's no such thing as a bad idea. There's execution, right? Like taking something somewhere. So yes, there is a bit of risk. But depending on the idea and how easy it is to rip off, right? Like, you got to get it out there if you even want to get feedback and like raise money for it. One example was the fidget cube. Have you guys seen those like square little fidget cubes? So they had launched this massive Kickstarter. I think it was like a year and a half ago. Raised like, I think they raised $1 million or something for this cube, or maybe not quite that much. And before they even like had finished their Kickstarter, another Chinese manufacturer took the exact idea and just started selling them on e-commerce or Alibaba or whatever. And so there are examples of that happening. In that case, it's like a super easy idea, and that's a pretty cheap blow, but I don't know. Like, talk to some consultants and advisors and see like, hey, can I put this on Kickstarter? I mean, like something like this that I've spent 2.5 years gathering data for and customer feedback. Could someone copy it? Yes, especially now that it's public. Someone could buy it and knock it off. Is there any incentive for someone to do that? Like, are they going to spend 2.5 years of work figuring out why I did it this way? Probably not. Most thieves are lazy, so that's something that is nice.
I mean, you just have to be smart about it and protect yourself. Like, I mean, sure, if your product or service is web-based, domain-specific, you better get that name. Make sure you own that. I mean, that's a very simple example, but make sure you own that before you make it public.
Wait, I wish I'd known this before I actually
Well, what do you want to hear about? Pros or cons?
Pros first. Cons first.
Cons. Taxes. We touched on that already. In the suggestions, I think they said statistically it's 26 days or whatever it is the most successful campaign length. And they have all these stats because they've done so many of them. And I went against that, and I was like, I'm not going to follow that because I want 3 paydays. I want the 1st, I want the 15th, and I want the 30th to make sure that I can capture those in people's ability to fund me. So the suggestions, I guess, in my case, I didn't think that was smart to follow. Cons, I think chatter amongst a small community can create, it's a telephone game, the rumor mill, this or that, and that causes social stress. When you put your idea out, everyone wants to talk to you, everyone asks this, and that starts to bog you down because you have to be genuine and honest, but I'm really tired and I really got to focus on delivering this. So that was a distraction, letting everybody know what I was doing ahead of time. That made it a little bit harder. So I picked Kickstarter specifically because, like he mentioned, IndieGoGo lets you keep the money. Well, do you trust me if it's like all or nothing, And as an entrepreneur, I almost lost my house. He's like, okay, it's got to work. It's all or nothing. So why wouldn't it be all or nothing with investors? Like, I want this to work. And that created, for me, more push, more drive. I don't like to invest in people who use IndieGoGo because they don't have anything on the line. There's no risk. For them, they're just asking for money, So the reward structure was also important to me because it's like, I'm promising that I deliver this, and I like that I'm going to get something out of it either way. I'm trying to reflect on IndieGoGo. I don't think there's is there a reward?
Yeah, you can actually set it up to where it's all or nothing,
right?
Funding. Yeah, it's not required, but you can make a campaign that's structured that way.
Mm-hmm. So there you have your fees, you have what's popular at the time. There's some of these I haven't even heard of, so I don't think they're going to be as effective in the community because you have to explain what it is. But I picked Kickstarter because it was up and new and it wasn't played out yet, and it still had a very strong positive name. And that's why I would suggest getting on the website and throwing some money at it, IndieGoGo, and seeing how that feels as the consumer or the investor, then getting on Kickstarter, throwing some money on something, see how that feels, how does it work, which one makes you feel better, which one makes you feel like proud of, because that's the same thing you're going to do for your investors. They're going to feel something, that initial emotional attachment to whatever it is you're offering, that's right there. If they have a bad experience with IndieGoGo, they've already had a bad experience with your name.
And I would also say just like look for the platform where your product is actually doing well on. There are some campaigns that seem to do pretty well on IndieGoGo. I think a lot of European backers like to use that platform. So if you had a project that you're really trying to get the European market or you're based in Europe, you might use that. I want to say like music and certain video games have done really well on IndieGoGo. The reason I chose Kickstarter was really just because that's where the majority of board gamers were going to crowdfund projects. So I chose the biggest market to be seen by the most people. So I would say like, I mean, and even Kickstarter's getting a little better. IndieGoGo had a much more eloquent platform actually for like just creating a beautiful page and everything. And like Kickstarter pages would freeze on me so many times. You try to upload a GIF or whatever, and it honks the website out. Right? They're still using HTML instead of like JavaScript and like all this old code from like 20 years ago. And like it's like, oh, what? Like I can't respond to each backer's comment. You can finally do that now. So like IndieGoGo is better, but I ultimately chose Kickstarter. IndieGoGo is an easier platform as a creator, but like I chose Kickstarter because there's more people on that platform that I knew would be interested in my product. So, yeah.
So if you don't raise enough money on, say, Kickstarter, does the money go back to the investors?
It's a pledge, so we never actually pull it. Yeah, it's like it's pledge, and if it succeeds, then it gets pushed through.
And what is the percentage of those that actually fall through the pledge? I mean, like that.
Yeah, it's less than 1% of credit cards get declined, I would say. Yeah.
I think I did have one that did decline, yeah.
I think, and I want to say the churn rate is around, well, at least in my industry, it's like something like 5%. I think for like every 5 to 6 pledges I got, I would maybe see one person unpledge. And sometimes it's because they like, will come back and pledge later when their paycheck's ready, or they want to get the better version or things like that too. So it varies and depends a little bit on your industry. Yeah.
Anybody follow you in Salem doing independent sort of restaurants or anything else? Or your footsteps after you're successful?
I did see, yeah, there was, and I don't know if it was specifically restaurant-based or whatever, but I met up with Vagabond, the brewing company, because they had done a Kickstarter, and I just called them and said, hey guys, I like what you did. I'm trying to launch my own Kickstarter. Will you look at my video? You know, get some feedback from someone who went through that, and that was super helpful. They said, yeah, yours is twice as good as ours. You're going to be fine. So they had really nothing to say other than go for it. But before then, there was only a couple that I had heard of. Post that, because I mean there was a lot of Kickstarter, and I think there was a period, there was a year there, probably in 2016, 2017, there was 5 or 6 or 7 very public Kickstarters, and it started to get like, oh great, another one, oh great, another one. Yeah, and it, I noticed that people, they weren't as successful, and I don't really know why, but I felt like jumping on it early was kind of important, or part of my luck. Timing was good.
Here's a trick question for you guys. What's more important, a Kickstarter video or the Kickstarter page?
Video.
It's both. About 50% of backers will watch a video first, and you want to have your video pretty short, like 2 minutes or less. And about 50% of backers will actually scroll through the page first. So it's actually you need a good video, but you also need a really clear, succinct page that people, I think at least in the gaming industry, I'm sure it's different in various ones, like within 15 seconds, people decide whether or not they're going to click on that pledge, like sort of based on what they're viewing, the average backer. Because like most of these, for me, a lot of these backers are like pretty wealthy, and they're actually sort of addicted to Kickstarter. Like a Kickstarter addiction is this real thing, like no joke, where they're addicted to just funding a new project and getting a new thing created. They see this new thing, oh, I want to have that, and oh, I want to have that. Very materialistic. And so like you want to take advantage of that addiction and basically have a campaign that as soon as people, oh yeah, got it, and then a simple reward level. Back to what Kate was saying, a common misconception that I see a lot, and people debate on this, is that you need to have a ton of rewards and like sell some coffee cups and some t-shirts and this and that, which may or may not work depending on your campaign. But the most prevailing advice is if you're starting a project, you're not trying to create a t-shirt company, you're trying to create a game or fund a restaurant. So have your rewards be related to the actual project versus throwing in all this extra crap, which I made the mistake of. I threw a bunch of extra add-ons and crap, and I've been dealing with that nightmare of having 40 SKUs the last month. No joke. Like my inbox is flooded with like, oh, this SKU went the wrong. Like, so keep it simple. Like 5 rewards max. If you can do 3 rewards, even better. Don't worry about a $1 reward. Have like collectors, this, and whatever. A good rule is like, if you think someone will, only if you think you'll get a couple people that will actually back this crazy expensive reward, put it on. If no one's going to actually pay for it, don't even put it there. And then there's another point I was going to make related to that. What was it? The other thing is just like as far as like the timeline. Oh, early birds. A lot of people want to say like, oh, do an early bird. But the danger with an early bird, so do you guys know what that is? So, okay, so basically it's just like the backers that get to the campaign first get a discount of the reward level, and then the ones that come on later like pay the full price. But what you do when you do that is you create winners and losers in your community. And so instead of doing that, do other incentives. Like a new thing that people have just started doing is create like a funding goal where like, hey guys, if we can get funded in 24 hours, we'll throw in this part for all of the backers.
Win-win.
Make it win-wins. Don't create losers and winners in your campaigns. So.
I think what would be super helpful is, because some of the advice that he's giving is not even applicable to me, doesn't even make any sense. And that's that locality versus the potential, the global, and the product, the widget, or the service. I think studying the successful ones was one of my biggest assets, and figuring out also the ones I didn't like. Why did I not like this? It's lagging, it's too simple, or it's too much, it's, you know, whatever that is. And it's like how I give Christmas gifts. I'm not gonna just give you this thing, like the best gift is the one that I wanna keep for myself, you know? So the same thing with that campaign, make it attract me, because I am the product and I can sell it to people who are like-minded. So that really worked for me, is really breaking down what was working and what wasn't in other videos. I would assume with a product that, a product that's global, I mean, you have so many more avenues that you can get into, like online forums, you can get into other websites, you can call up New York and say, hey, how do I, you know, get into this little network? But for me, something that's local, it's everyone you know, and it was a call to action. Will you please share this with your family? You know, where can I post this? Or, you know, what do I got to do to get this out in front of more people? And just working the community.
Actually, I would say it doesn't matter if it's global or local. The same strategy applies. It's all of the above in your community. I mean, like the day before, I was calling literally everyone in my Google contacts list and saying, hey, I'm launching this campaign tomorrow. I know you're not a gamer, but would you please just like go pledge $1 so I can get as much traction to my page as possible? And then I had a mailing list of 600 people that I built up for 2.5 years, my community of people that were waiting for this project, waiting to fund it the second I hit the button, actually. So like, whether it's a local, I don't know, maybe you disagree, but whether it's a local Kickstarter or a global Kickstarter, I think it still comes down to bringing that community with you, and then just like everyone you know. And yes, you can hook up social media. I did that for this. If you can get, like I was able to get Project We Love from Kickstarter, and that kicks your algorithm to where more people are seeing it. You can hook up Google Analytics and actually test what ads and where you're actually getting things from. And like, oh, this like super nerdy website is giving me a lot of sales. I'm gonna go post there, or like give them some free games and like ask them to ask more. So there's a lot of different techniques, but at the end of the day, it's like your community, your crowd that you built up beforehand, having them there with you on day one, and just like hustling and saying like, hey guys, help me do this.
Maintaining that line of communication with these people that are going to be your potential first supporters, or at least, you know, the dollar pledgers.
I think he said it earlier, just be very transparent, be very clear and honest. This is my time frame, this is my goal, this is when it's gonna, this is what my plan is, my steps. And then you can, on Kickstarter at least, there's updates. Hey, we just broke ground. Hey, we just got our liquor license. Hey, we're opening in 6 months or whatever. But I think it's just honesty in the beginning, like anything.
And a lot of people I notice, people don't take advantage of just plain old paper mailing lists. I would see a lot of other companies that are showing off their game and stuff, and they're not collecting any information from their fans. So I set my one goal. Okay, I'm going to go to, my first sale was at a farmer's market. I was like, I'm going to get as many emails as possible from my local farmer's market of people who might be interested in, and track that. And so I just because people it's not too hard to maintain the community if you're honest and open, and you keep people updated. Hey, we're not launching this year because we need to make it better for you. We don't want to launch it yet because we're going to give you a shit product. So let's not do that. And then there's other ways. You can create a group on Facebook where you invite people to join that and keep them updated and keep fans. There's a lot of, it's sort of one of those questions it really would depend on your business and product and whatnot. But I don't know, there's ways to make it manageable.
And I feel that if you have a good product and you have a good work ethic and you have a good plan, it doesn't matter if they're there with you at your launch, because you can't rely on just your backers. You are launching something that needs to work without them, right? So you just set the goal, you do the thing, and then you just do what it takes to open or to launch, because you believe in that product, not because of if you're lucky to get 300 backers or even 1,000 backers, that's not going to sustain your business, right? So shouldn't matter, in my opinion.
Well, you begin to plan.
Mm-hmm. Well, wow. I gauged my reach based on social media, based on, I compared myself to other people. I compared myself to the brewery, the Vagabond boys. Those were 3 well-known young go-getters who raised this much money. And I was like, I can raise that much money by myself. It's unrealistic to think that I could raise 50 or 100. So in my research of watching the other ones, because I did a lot of research on cafes, a lot of research on breweries, restaurants, cafe, coffee shop, coffee bars, and how much were they asking for, and then what did they actually pull in. And I would gauge, and I would look at their campaign, I go, that was a quality campaign, and they only brought in 10 grand. That was a quality campaign, they brought in 50, So I had my own kind of gut feeling about what I believed in, that I could do, and I upped a little bit more to push myself. So it's, you kind of have to take an honest look at your abilities and what you think you can do, and what kind of tools and resources you have, what kind of team you have around you. Do you have a tech guy? Do you have a younger person? Because they interact with social media much different than I do. And then my father, he's really good at these other things, and that he can't touch social media. So really you have to look at yourself and what tools you have for you. But that's what I did. I compared myself to,
I would say because you're asking about funding goals, right? The goal you put. So in my opinion, your funding goal should be the minimum amount that you need to raise to successfully fulfill the promise to your backers. And ideally have that amount be as small as possible, but no smaller than necessary to actually complete your promise to your backers. So if you need $50,000 to make this thing or create this whatever, and you have $10,000 of your own money, and you can get a $5,000 loan, then I would make it my goal $35,000 if I was willing to put that up front. And you can even tell your backers that, and you can say, hey, and you should actually tell your backers, this is why I chose this number. I have $10,000 of my own cash. I'm getting a $5,000 loan. I need $35,000 to complete this. Maybe give yourself a little buffer, right? And then we'll be golden, right? So, because you want as low a goal as possible, but you also want to have trust from your backers that you can complete the project with the money you raise.
And again, take into account that his product's much different than mine. I didn't approach that way at all. I did t-shirts and cups and stickers and high fives and growlers of beer, or, the cost to fulfill my pledges was not very much. And so I took a much different approach. So it really kind of depends on a lot of variables, whether it's you're selling a widget or a service and local or whatever, you really kind of have to break it down into, it's not an easy answer.
So for yours is predominantly based on providing a pre-order product, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas he was doing a service, a business service, correct? So your rewards to your backers.
Yeah. So we approached it differently. Yeah.
Rewards were different. Ultimately, we created a community that wanted to make something happen. at the end of the day. I mean, that's what it's about, creating this community